calling to order the regular meeting of the El Segundo City Council, Tuesday, April 3rd. Please rise. Pastor George Lopez from the Bridge Church will give us our invocation, and Mayor Pro Tem Boyles will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord, we thank you for your blessings in our lives, Lord. We thank you for your faithfulness. And tonight we just pray that you would watch over this meeting, Lord, that you would watch over those who serve our community so well. Lord, we also pray for our police and our fire department, Lord, that you would protect them and their families as they protect ours, Lord God. So, Lord, I pray that you would go before us tonight, that you would give us wisdom and discernment as we go about the business of what it means to lead and lead well. We thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Pastor and Mayor Pro Tem. So this evening we have two proclamations and two presentations, and Mayor Pro Tem Boyles is going to read the first proclamation.
Yes, this is related to Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Whereas the United States government has declared April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and Peace Over Violence has declared April 25th, 2018 as Denim Day in Los Angeles County, and whereas both events are intended to draw attention to the fact that rape and sexual assault remains a serious issue in our society, and whereas harmful attitudes about rape and sexual assault allow these crimes to persist and allow victims, survivors to be re-victimized, and whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Denim Day were also instituted to call attention to misconceptions and misinformation about rape and sexual assault, and the problem that many in society remain disturbingly uninformed with respect to issues of assault and forcible rape, and whereas every 2 minutes someone in America is sexually assaulted, approximately 1 in 6 women are raped during their lifetime, and youths under 18 account for about 44% of all reported. And whereas with proper education on the matter, there is compelling evidence that we can be successful in reducing incidents of this alarming and psychologically damaging crime. And whereas the members of the City Council strongly support the efforts of Peace Over Violence to educate persons in our community about the true impact of rape and sexual assault in Southern California. Now, therefore, the mayor and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, hereby proclaim the month of April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month and designate April 25th, 2018 as Denim Day, and urges everyone to wear jeans on April 25th, 2018 to help communicate the message that there is no excuse and never an invitation to rape. And it's signed by the mayor and all members of City Council.
Thank you. And our second proclamation is for DMV Donate Life California Month. Whereas organ, tissue, marrow, and blood donation are life-giving acts recognized worldwide as expressions of compassion to those in need, and whereas more than 114,000 individuals nationwide and more than 21,000 in California are currently on the National Organ Transplant Waiting List, and on average 20 people die each day while waiting due to the shortage of donated organs, and whereas the need for donated organs is especially urgent in Hispanic and African American communities, and whereas more than 600,000 units of blood per year are needed to meet the need in California, and at any given time 6,000 patients are in need of volunteer marrow donors, and whereas a single individual's donation of the heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, pancreas, and small intestines can save up to 8 lives, donation of tissue can save and heal the lives of up to 75 others, and a single blood donation can help 3 people in need. And whereas millions of lives each year are saved and healed by donors of organs, tissues, marrow, and blood, and the spirit of giving and decision to donate are not restricted by age or medical condition, and whereas over 14 million Californians have signed up with the state-authorized Donate Life California Donor Registry to ensure their wishes to be organ, eye, and tissue donors are honored. And whereas California residents can sign up with the Donate Life California donor registry when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID cards at the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Now therefore, the mayors and members of the City Council of the City of El Segundo, California, in recognition of National Donate Life Month, hereby proclaim the month of April 2018 as DMV Donate Life California Month in El Segundo, and in doing so, we encourage all Californians to check yes when applying for or renewing their driver's license or ID card, or by signing up on www.donatelifecalifornia.org. And there's no one here this evening to receive this proclamation, but I want to say, just this week, my friend's sister received a liver that saved her life. She was very close to dying, and it's through the generosity of some family who came forward. So this touches all of us. Thank you. So next we have a presentation, the Police and Firefighters Association and the Lakers Organization.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. A few weeks ago, the El Segundo Police Officers and Firefighter Association had a charity basketball game to raise money for the El Segundo Education Foundation. I'll let the police officers tell everyone who won later, but we would like to thank a few people that came out in support of our event. Specifically, the Los Angeles Lakers opened up their doors to the community, to the police officers and firefighters to play our game. The event was sponsored by the South Bay Lakers organization, right next door to the fire station at UCLA Health South Training Center. We'd like to thank Mattel, Big Five, Bill Ruane, Embassy Suites, Petros Cafe, Anheuser-Busch, Scott Nickel, and Beach Mex for all of their donations to our raffle, which went off great. We were very happy to receive those donations, and it helped raise additional money for the Education Foundation. We would like to be especially thankful to the El Segundo High School for they were able to put their band, their choir, their cheer squad, including volunteers from Avid and National Charity League, to come out and support the event. I'd like to thank all members of council that came out and supported the event as well. Members of the community, this is important not only just for the police and firefighters to get out and build a relationship between the two of us, but also to extend that relationship to the City of El Segundo and the Education Foundation. I'd like to call up Ryan Danowitz.
Sergeant Ryan Danowitz, El Segundo Police. First off, congratulations to Fire for winning this year. Last year, Police won, so we had this for a full year. We decided to donate to them for another year. Just let them know that they did play better. They won, but we're going to be coming back to take it back next year. And thank you for the Lakers organization for allowing us to play in such a great facility.
Ken, want to say anything?
If we may at this time, if we could ask Barbara Briney from the El Segundo Education Foundation so that we can give a check for $3,500, which is the ticket sales and raffle ticket sales that all of the El Segundo community so graciously came out and donated in support. So we are very happy to make a donation to the El Segundo Education Foundation on behalf of the El Segundo Firefighters and Police Officers Association.
Thank you.
And one last thing, I'm going to be giving this to the fire department right now, so if they make an excuse that they lost it or something, you guys know that it was handed over to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Yeah, if we may.
Do we have the two MVPs up here from both teams? Pretty close.
Yes,
I don't know.
all
I
of
was
us.
watching the game.
Yes, all the council will take a photo, but we want to thank the Los Angeles Lakers organization. You're such a wonderful community member. As I said last week, every time we think we can't love you anymore, you do something else. So thank you to your generosity to our city and our school district and our education foundation. Thank you.
It's good that we actually converted the Briney family to Kiwanis from Rotary today, too.
That will never happen. No, because the Rotary are the nicest people in town, like the Brineys. Okay, so our next presentation is Lieutenant Lehman. He's going to make a special introduction tonight.
Just wanted to ask Firefighter Davies to make sure you take care of my trophy. Stephanie? Madam Mayor and member of City Council, thank you for having me here tonight. I want to introduce to you our newest El Segundo police officer, Officer Stephanie Martinez. This is an opportunity for me not only to brag about our newest officer, to brag a little about our department. I came here in 1995. I lateraled from the Sheriff's Department, and I was immediately struck with the high level of professionalism, dedication from the officers here. And 22 years later, we still have it. Our standards have remained high, and that's something that I'm excited about. I know all of you are too. Enter Stephanie Martinez. Falls right in line with everything we've been looking for. So Stephanie has lived in the city of El Segundo since the age of 10. She went to El Segundo schools, played AYSO soccer, played soccer for El Segundo High School. Soccer players are the best. She always wanted to be a police officer, and she knew early on that she needed to prepare herself in a lot of ways to make herself the best candidate possible. So after high school, she joined the United States Marine Corps, spent 5 years in the United States Marine Corps. When she completed the Marine Corps, she decided she knew that being a police officer required a lot of writing. It's true. You're going to find that out very, very shortly, within about a week. So she got her degree in English from UC Riverside, and she knew that it's a dangerous job, so she's remained physically fit. She's an avid CrossFitter, which is definitely something that's going to help her in her journey here. You know, when I was looking at her bio, I thought to myself, this is the poster child for the El Segundo police officer. This is exactly what we're looking for. She came from our city. She did everything right. She did everything she could have done to prepare herself for this moment, and that's something she should be extremely proud of. I know I am, and I'm sure you are as well. So I was reading her bio that was sent to me earlier, and I don't know who wrote this. It was just one of the bios about her at the station, but I wanted to read it right out of the paperwork that I got because I kind of like it. So Stephanie is a mother to an energetic 8-year-old son, Elias, and enjoys laser tagging with him, as well as bike riding, skateboarding, visiting Legoland. Her future goals include successfully completing training and being a role model for her son. I thought to myself, she's a role model for her son. Mission accomplished. Look at her standing here. The academy's not easy. Getting hired by El Segundo Police is not easy, and she's here standing with me today. So I want to congratulate her. Very proud. And she's going to say a couple things as well.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm so privileged and honored to be part of this community again. I left it when I went to the Marine Corps in 2007. And, you know, I always came back to be on leave and stuff like that. And I always remember waking up in the morning thinking, oh man, I have to leave this. It's such a bummer. But again, I'm so privileged and honored to be back in this capacity and serving the community this way. So thank you so much for having me here. And I really look forward to serving the community in whatever asset I can.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Officer Martinez. Welcome home. Thank you for your service, and you're going to have a long life of service ahead of you. And thank you for choosing El Segundo. We're really grateful to you. And we're going to take photos with you. And do you have any family members or friends tonight?
Not tonight, ma'am.
Okay. Well, if you want to bring them back sometime, we'd love to take photos with them. So congratulations.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, an important day in our city's history. Officer Martinez. Next, we have a presentation on the West Basin Desalinization Plant.
And Mayor, if I might just briefly, this item or project, if you will, of the proposed desalination plant being built near the beach in El Segundo is going through a process. Currently, there's been a draft environmental impact report prepared for this project by West Basin. It's out for circulation currently. It's going to be, there's a 60-day period for the public to provide comments on the draft EIR. When that process is over, there will be responses. West Basin will prepare responses to those comments at some point in the future, and we don't have a date at this time. Maybe the spokesperson will or presenter will have some time estimates, but this will come to the city, first to the Planning Commission and then to the City Council, as it will require some approvals by the city, as this area that the desalination plant is proposed to be in is in the local coastal zone of the city, and the city has a local coastal plan that it adopted a number of years ago that governs this part of the city. The final decision on the project, though, is not will not be made by the city. It will be made by the California Coastal Commission. The city will have a role in the process, but is not the final decision maker. I would recommend the council tonight that you will be hearing this at a public meeting or a public hearing at some point in the future, and I would assume that's at least 4 to 6 months from now, but that you refrain from, you can certainly ask questions and whatnot, but since this will be a decision that you will ultimately have to make at some point in the future, that you refrain from expressing opinions on it. Thank you.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Mayor, members of council, we have several people from West Basin Water District here tonight, but Sivaji Deshmukh is going to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Good evening, Mayor Fuentes, members of the council. On behalf of West Basin, we appreciate the opportunity to provide an overview of our ocean water desalination draft environmental impact report. As presented by the attorney, this is a summary of the EIR, which is a component of the California Environmental Quality Act, and today we're going to provide a brief update on the document itself. Before I highlight some of the components of the document, I do want to provide a brief background on West Basin. For those of you familiar with West Basin, we are a special district, a member agency of Metropolitan Water District, representing 17 cities in coastal Los Angeles County, with a mission to provide a safe and reliable supply of high-quality water to the communities we have. We currently provide imported potable water from Metropolitan through a number of investor-owned utilities and municipalities like El Segundo. We also do provide recycled water as well as numerous conservation programs. Being a special district, we're governed by 5 elected officials, and for Division 4, which El Segundo is in, we're represented by Director Scott Houston, who's also the Vice President on our board. West Basin has had a long history in diversifying its portfolio to meet the needs of its customers. Before we were formed in 1947, based on the population and the local groundwater supplies, this area was predominantly on groundwater. But as pumping increased and the groundwater basin became overdrafted, the natural tendency of seawater to intrude made that a more challenged drinking water source. So over the next 50 years, West Basin, working through Metropolitan, provided its customers imported water. What that refers to is water from Northern California or the Colorado River. So in 1990, after a significant drought, the West Basin Board, working with its customer agencies, recognized that that supply portfolio was not adequate and that we could develop local supplies here. So they had a great foresight to look at developing a rigorous conservation program to reduce the demand in our area, but at the same time build a recycled water plant. We have the opportunity of being right next to the City of Los Angeles' Hyperion treatment plant, and they were discharging all their secondary treated wastewater out to the bay. We saw that as a resource and started a recycling program in 1995. Currently, we're at this supply mix, providing one drinking water quality, and that's our imported water, as well as one non-drinking quality, which is our recycled water, which I'll also talk about in a bit. But about 15 years ago, our board recognized that as a coastal water agency, that it would be responsible to look at the ocean as a potential supply. They did recognize that this comes with challenges in terms of making sure that we protect the environment and doing it in an energy efficient manner. So they directed staff to perform a number of research projects and studies to look at, is there a way to do this in an environmentally friendly manner? And the goal was to develop even more supply diversity and to develop something like this where potentially we could offset that imported water by ocean desalination. Once again, this would be something that's only considered if the board was moving forward with desalination of ocean water. Before I talk about the project, I just want to highlight two of our main focuses, focal areas at the district in terms of, number one, it's our job to educate our customer agencies and ultimately their customers that conservation is a way of life. If we reduce the amount of water demand, then we're doing our job and we'll try to make sure that there is water there for the remaining demand. Through programs where we're distributing water saving devices, rain barrel programs where we give away to our customers, and ultimately education on how to better landscape in our climate in Southern California to handle the very sporadic rain that we get here. These are just three examples of many of the programs that we do working with our customers, including the City of El Segundo. What probably we're most famous for, and we appreciate greatly with our host city, is the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility. Edward C. Little was a former director of ours who represented this area as well, and he was instrumental in developing this plant in 1995. While our program extends throughout the South Bay, this is really the heart of the treatment process, located at Sepulveda and Hughes, which takes the water that we purchase from City of LA and treats it to 5 different qualities to meet the different needs of our customers, industrial and commercial customers in the South Bay. We're actually reaching a very important milestone. We're nearing 200 billion gallons of water produced. That's 200 billion gallons that we didn't need to import from Northern California or the Colorado River. So it's a very exciting time. It's a very important project, and it's actually set the example for a number of projects throughout the world. And a reflection of that is we get literally thousands of visitors a year. It doesn't hurt that we're located right next to LAX, but we do get a lot of visitors coming in to see this plant and to see our unique qualities of water for our customers. We have recently entered into an agreement with the City of LA to do a pilot project to see if we can actually increase the amount of water we put through this existing facility. So our anticipation is that we maximize the amount of recycled water with the facilities and space we have in El Segundo. So this continues to be the main focus and the highest priority for West Basin today. Getting into the project overview for the ocean water desalination plant, what were our objectives? Well, it really goes back to that pie chart in terms of diversifying our source portfolio to increase our reliability. Ultimately, that's to reduce our reliance on imported water, which not only benefits our service area, but the entire Southern California area. We also want to improve water security by being in control of the supply as well as the infrastructure, rather than just being a customer of other agencies' water. Having these kind of projects ultimately helps with maintaining rate increases and long-term price stability, and it also fits in well with climate resiliency. Climate change can affect how often it rains. You're going to see much longer periods of drought and much wetter periods when it does rain, and having a local supply that's independent of the hydrologic cycle is very important. But ultimately, it's in our mission is to be environmentally responsible and make sure that this is an economically viable project. So these really were our objectives going into the project. Looking at the key components, there's a couple onshore components as well as offshore, and I'll describe those briefly. We need a treatment facility, which is essentially a membrane treatment plant to take the salt out of water. It's very similar to the treatment process we use to desalinate wastewater, but this time we're feeding it with ocean water. We have to bring that water in, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the infrastructure required to do that. When you bring in 2 gallons of seawater, 1 gallon becomes product water, 1 becomes a brine or salty concentrate discharge, so you have to return that back out into the marine environment. And then ultimately you need a pumping and piping system to get that water to the distribution system. So in the EIR, we're proposing a 20 million gallon per day project, which is initial, and if there are partners out there, based on the space we have at our preferred location, we anticipate we could go up to 60 gallons per day. The preferred site is actually at the El Segundo generating station, so on the southwest corner of El Segundo along the coast. I assume our council is familiar with this area. It's owned by NRG, and there's a power facility there. There's actually 2 units of the previous generation facilities, units 3 and 4, that are out of service. So our preferred site would be to be at that, what we refer to as the north site. We looked at the site as a whole, and we also saw that there's opportunity in terms of real estate to the south. But for us, as you'll see why, the north is better. When we're looking for the siting of an ocean water desalination facility, it's very important to have an intake and a discharge. And for us to minimize impact on the environment, we look to places that already have these, and power plants typically have those facilities in place. Here's a view looking easterly, inland, at the existing facility. You can see on the left the power generation facilities. On the right or the south side is what used to be a tank farm, and now it's a large concrete pad there. So we looked at both sites as opportunities, and in the EIR we do have renderings of this. So in terms of the north site, we would be removing the stacks at 3 and 4, and you can see on the bottom that it would be a relatively low profile building, replacing that embedded within the power plant today. The south site, a little different layout due to the size we have there, but you'll also notice that it's adjacent to a residential community. So as you can guess, it's the environmentally preferred site from our EIR standpoint that we put it in the north location. In terms of those offshore facilities, there is an existing about a half a mile intake, and there's about 500 feet short of that, there's the discharge tunnel. Previously, these were used to draw seawater in to cool the power plant before. So we're looking to use these to bring water into our treatment facility. We haven't done a full analysis of the condition of these, so that would really affect the amount of work we have to do there. It's important to point out that as we develop this EIR, we've done preliminary planning. We haven't actually done the design. So as we go through the analysis, we really took a conservative or a worst case scenario look at the impacts. So in this case, as we go through that, you'll see a very conservative approach in determining what those are. In terms of drawing the water in, approximately 2 years ago, there was an amendment to the ocean plan, which actually established requirements. And we had the opportunity to input, and a lot of the research that West Basin did actually helped establish the regulations. And one of those is that you would look for 2 different ways to draw water in, either through a subsurface facility or a screened intake, and we're proposing that here based on the geology that's around the El Segundo area. We'd have a 1 millimeter screen opening size, and the design of this would allow for, it has to be less than 0.5 feet per second. That means the slower the water comes in, the less impact on the environment. In terms of the salty discharge brine out, we would use the existing discharge tunnel and apply a concept called diffusion, which basically gets the saltier water out in a faster speed so that it mixes quickly, and that within the distance outlined in the ocean plan, we reach that ambient or existing salinity very quickly. We also talked about the product conveyance or the drinking water conveyance. So once we produce that water in El Segundo, we have to get it into our system or around our system. These are some preliminary layouts where we would have pipelines going through the city of El Segundo and potentially tying in downstream of our Met connection for a number of agencies that are around this area. Once again, high-level concept issues, and we took a conservative approach. If we were to go up to 60 million gallons per day, we'd be working with a possible partner of Metropolitan, tying in a bit further east. In regards to the EIR, as a city council, I assume that you deal with environmental impact reports as part of the CEQA process. So this table of contents is probably very standard for you. I would like to point out, though, when we come to the environmental analysis, there's a number of resources that we look at, and we have to determine if there's an impact, if there's less than significant impact, if there's less than significant impact with mitigation, or ultimately significant and unavoidable impact. And so we have identified that here for the 16 areas. I'd like to point out that 2 areas during construction we've determined to have significant and unavoidable impacts during construction, and I'm going to talk about those later, once again assuming the worst case scenario. So those 2 were air and noise, but I think we tried to suggest what some of the areas of interest for El Segundo City Council as well as the staff's going to be. We're very excited to get the comments back from obviously all our stakeholders, but as a potential host city, it's very important we get a very thorough review and input from the city, so we look forward to that. I'm going to talk about aesthetics, ocean water quality, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, and sea level rise. But let's talk about the first 2 in terms of construction. Nowadays, with the technology we have for onshore construction equipment, it's actually improved quite significantly over the past decade. But we did take a conservative approach that there may be some work we need to do in the ocean just off the coast with tugboats when we do some construction there for the intake and discharge. So NOx is nitrogen oxides. Those are things that we'll monitor for. So our mitigation would be to make sure that we require the contractor as we design this facility to use cleaner emission equipment and control dust on site. We do determine, though, that in the document that the impacts would remain significant and unavoidable if it was for these conservative assumptions. In terms of noise, we wanted to make, once again, the most conservative assumption. So we assumed that the site existed at the south end, near the residences, and we assumed, without looking at the geology there, that we'd have to hammer piles into the ground. That does create noise. We would provide sound blankets, sound attenuation, or possibly sound paneling, but we determined that that would also be a more significant impact. Those were the only 2 that we saw in terms of our analysis showed to be significant. I do want to highlight the aesthetics. Whether it's on the south or north site, we definitely mitigate by ensuring an architectural design that's acceptable to us as well as the city, and landscape plans to soften views. In terms of ocean water quality, I mentioned how we would be using diffusers, or the concept of diffusion. There's very clear guidelines in the ocean plan that say at what distance you're supposed to achieve your blending, and we would be well within that per our design. We also are looking at how we draw water in, and utilizing the wedge wire screens could have an impact on the microorganisms smaller than that screen size, but our mitigation approach would be to provide coastal wetland restoration or fees to compensate for project impacts, and that's consistent with what the ocean plan determines. Energy use is a big part of ocean desalination. It takes energy to take the salt out of the water. So we've incorporated devices like energy recovery devices, as well as other staging approaches that help us reduce the energy. So we feel we can control the amount of energy to make it competitive with some other water supplies. But then where you get that energy from is also important. So we have to look at greenhouse gas emissions. Early on, our board had identified that mitigation measures here could be first to make sure we reduce the amount of energy, then look for on-site renewables, and then get into the renewable power purchase agreements, or look at what opportunities there are at the state for carbon offset. So a lot of opportunities here to minimize our greenhouse gas emissions. And then finally, sea level rise. This is very well established in the California Coastal Commission in terms of design standards. We would make sure that we perform a coastal hazard resiliency study as a requirement of that permit and make sure that we can conform with that. So staff, through the EIR document, feels like all of these are less than significant with the mitigation included, and the analysis is further presented in our document. Just to conclude, our board has prioritized, since we've discussed the CEQA phase, a significant amount of transparency and accessibility. And so they've already taken one action, as City Attorney pointed out, to extend the comment period to 60 days. It has started on March 27th, closing on March 25th. We do have 2 public meetings, and I do apologize. I think that's the wrong address. I think the Richmond Street Elementary School is on Richmond Street, not on Sheldon. I believe that's another school. But we do have 2 public meetings. We wanted to make sure they were both in El Segundo. But ultimately, what we're going to do is we want to get all the comments. We want to make sure we properly respond to them. So we're directing through 3 different ways: mailing, emailing, or online submission for those comments. As always, our board supports the stakeholders coming to our board meeting, letting us know. But we really look forward to the input that we're going to get over the next just under 50 days. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. But once again, we appreciate the opportunity to present in front of the council today.
Savaji, you said the closing period was March 25th. It's May 25th, right?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, just to clarify, I meant to say May 25th. So.
Well, thank you. Questions, council?
Evening. Back on your slides 12 and 13, you show the location at the south or the north site. I'm wondering, with either of those sites, is there any visibility of the facility and the operation from any of the residential properties in El Segundo? Or do you know?
I would refer to the EIR document, but what I would say anecdotally is that they're not due to the location of Chevron being right above on the bluff, and most of the residences are to the north, overlooking Hyperion and Scattergood. But once again, I would suggest to look at the renderings we have in the EIR document from that.
And there's some renderings there that shoot from east to west, because everything I see shoots from west to east.
I believe there are, as it's part of the requirement. I know that there was some, I have seen some that show from Vista Del Mar looking down and what the views are there. Right. Some of those photos will look the same because we've tried to do a low profile.
And then the same questions with respect to North Manhattan Beach or El Porto and what their view or visibility is of the operation south or north.
And you could see it in this, Councilman, that with the south site, there would be some visibility there. I believe those renderings are also in there that we took, and I forgot the street's name, but looking north, what it would look like.
45th Street. And yeah, I'm interested in the view from the east to the west and what is visible. Is either the south or the north location going to be dug down into the ground some to lower the profile?
Yeah, and they will be different elevations, and that information, specific information's in there based on the infrastructure that exists today. So yes, they will be at different elevations. You can even actually see that slightly in the renderings here if I go back and forth between north and south.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions related to the existing facility at the Little facility. Toward that great facility, I know we're years away from a perception standpoint of being able to drink that water, even though it's arguably potable. How many million gallons a year is that facility generating? A milestone of 275 billion, but how many million gallons a year, and at what percent of capacity is it at?
Sure, that facility right now is producing approximately 40 million gallons per day. And the unique feature about that facility is the production capacity of it is really controlled by the quality of influent. So right now we're focused on working with the City of LA to improve that quality. And if we're able to improve that quality with an investment at Hyperion, then we can see some increases in the amount we could put through the Ed C. Little facility. That's really our focus right now. I would point out that at a conceptual level, if we're at about 40 million gallons per day right now, we envision that with some investment, we could get up to 70 million gallons per day, with 15 million gallons additional for our service area and a potential 15 million gallons for the City of LA harbor area.
70 million total production capacity per day, potentially.
That's correct.
With the right water quality intake. Okay.
And a bit more investment in infrastructure.
How much investment, roughly?
We haven't costed that out yet, but it's based on the land we have available. So once we're able to determine what quality we can get from Hyperion, then we can use that to determine what investment there.
Additional capital equipment, no land though. You already have the land, you're saying. You just
right.
Okay.
We believe we can do that within the land we have.
Okay, and then just curious, I've thrown numbers and I haven't read the EIR yet. It's pretty daunting. So if you have a Cliff Note version, that'd be great. But how many years roughly? Is it 60 million for the project? What's the total project pro forma on building this potential?
You mean the capital cost?
Yeah.
Once again, we haven't designed the facility, but our early estimates would range from 450 to over $500 million.
That was way off. Okay, so how many years to recoup that investment?
It's a little hard to answer that question because we don't really use this as we would most likely look for grants, both federal and state. We haven't decided yet how we would charge or create rates based on this project. But most of the time we finance these kind of projects for a 25-year life. So that's usually the financing approach. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the payback, but that is the life of the project typically.
Okay, and then in terms of the conveyance that would need to be built, that slide you showed, how many miles of construction would that be roughly? And how long, what kind of impact are we looking at in terms of duration of construction and miles of pipeline? Or are you tapping into some existing? I think you said that would be east of Sepulveda or east El Segundo.
Yes.
Yeah, so all that, like, what are we looking at there?
Councilman, I couldn't say exactly right now without having my information in front of me, but with a 20 million gallon a day facility, our anticipation is not needing to go much farther than the 405. So whatever that distance is, that's approximately where we'd go with 20 million gallons per day. With 60, then we're talking about extending over into the Inglewood area. But that's also a number that staff can provide, and it's in the document.
So the blue is existing, you tap into metropolitan water. The green is the all potential new conveyance.
That's correct.
Okay. That was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just for clarification and to Drew's comments, so the current facility at the little facility is 40 million gallons, and you think you guys can, with any additional land, go up to an additional 20 up to 70, or you could go up to 70 million gallons. Yet this facility would only then produce 20 million gallons.
That's correct.
And then the one question I had is your model with your pie chart, how it breaks out. How are you anticipating, how is that going to look with the growth of Los Angeles County? And what do you anticipate in the next 10, 15 years as far as growth, and how would that model change?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what the luxury we have in our service area is that we're relatively built out in terms of land. So the real water demand increases take place when people are watering their lawns. So if these communities start to move or grow upwards, we've found that a lot of areas are actually reducing their per capita use significantly. And so even with population growth, we're seeing water demand go down. So,
sorry, you're saying as California densifies, you're anticipating the water demand go down?
I would only say for our area, because we're relatively built out. We anticipate a certain amount of growth or demand increase, but not that would match the amount of population increase.
But you're talking two different types of water. Like one that comes from the Ed C. Little plant is irrigation, industry uses, where what would come from the desal plant is drinkable water.
That's correct. And as Mayor Pro Tem Boyles pointed out, that while we do a significant amount of potable reuse at the Edward C. Little plant, where you can actually drink and taste the water, all that water goes in the ground. And the California recycled water community in West Basin is definitely very active in that. We're looking at establishing regulations to take the next few steps to get to direct potable reuse. And working in this industry, we definitely are there from a treatment capacity, but in terms of monitoring and protecting health and establishing the regulations, we feel that there's a few more years before we get to that point and have the comfort to be able to do that. But we're already doing that now at about 17 million gallons per day. We're producing a water that you can actually drink, and that goes in the ground ultimately to be pumped up by some of our customers.
So I have a question to follow up on Drew's question. So you're talking about potentially increasing from 40 million to 70 million gallons a day at the Ed C. Little plant, and you already have all the property you need to do that. You would have to build up the infrastructure.
Yes, we view it in two ways. One, we would have to improve the quality that feeds our plant, and then all of a sudden you can essentially push more water through. But we'd also need to add some facilities to handle that extra water. But when they when they made the plans in the early 90s, they actually had estimated that it would be about 70,000 acre feet. And our plant has been built in stages, and we've gotten to this 40 million gallons per day. And so now we're looking, and we plan to do an update to our recycled water master plan in the next year. It's in our draft budget right now that'll be going to our board. That's where we'll really look at defining what it takes to get to that 70. But at a concept level, we feel we're in the right direction.
So at one time, there's a possibility that the City of El Segundo was going to use some of that property for parking for the golf course. Would any of that be used for this?
Right now, we don't anticipate it. That area is on the northwest corner, and one of the reasons that it was we felt it would be a good partnership with the city is based on its layout. There's not much use for us there aside from lay down when we do construction.
And during this 50 remaining days of comments or afterwards, will there be opportunities for the public to go visit Carlsbad?
I do believe the San Diego County Water Authority works with a private entity, Poseidon, and they do offer tours. And all of us in the water industry, I know we've helped coordinate a tour for some of the city council. We'd be always happy to help and assist with the planning of that.
Because I took the tour with the city manager and with Greg McLean, and as I reported at the time, it was underwhelming because it's very quiet and there's no odor. And I have a degree in biology with an emphasis in marine biology, so I was pleased with everything that I learned that day about the intake and how it's processed and the marine life. So that might be potentially something that's available to some of our residents.
And we appreciate that input.
Any other?
I just got to ask. I think I didn't get a straight answer, and it wasn't. I think you don't have the answer, but if you had to guess, so we're looking at $500 million to build the plant with the $60 million of sunk cost to do the study. What might it cost to add additional capacity to Little? Are we talking about like 50 million, 30 million, 100 million?
I don't have those costs, Mayor Pro Tem. I would say that that is something that we would probably have in the next year. But I'd also point out, when we take a look at these water supplies, at least for us, it's not an either or on Ed C. Little or potential desalination plant. Right now, in round numbers, we have about 100,000 acre feet we import from Metropolitan or purchase from them. As we expand if we go up 15 million gallons per day or 15,000 acre feet, that cuts in 15%. We still have 85,000 of imported water we buy. So from our, going back to the pie, we feel we want to keep increasing the recycled water pie. We want to keep increasing the conservation pie, but there's still a large volume of water we buy from Metropolitan. So that's what we would be reducing with the potential desal plant.
Thank you.
And I know this isn't this project, but the tunnels, are those still going in Central California to move the water, the Delta tunnels?
Yeah, and that's going to be considered next week. They're talking about new phasing for that. But yeah, it's the biggest issue going on at our parent entity, Metropolitan, right now.
That's exorbitantly expensive, and years of project. And any other questions, Mike? Come on, it's engineering, it's pipes. You love this stuff.
So I've looked at it, I'm going, okay, so 20 million gallons a day. If you know the tank field on the south side of the refinery, the bigger tanks over, that's one of those tanks. It's about 500,000 barrels. So that's how much you're going to put out in a day through the pipeline. That's not a lot. That's like pretty much half of a marine load coming in on a tanker. So it's not a lot of water. It sounds like a big number, but that's not a heck of a lot of water out of a desal facility. So it's going to be expensive water.
Of an earthquake, you'll be.
Oh no, I'm not saying one thing or another. I'm just trying to put it in perspective. To move that much around in a day seems like it's huge, but it's very manageable. So.
Does the EIR cover economic benefit or no? Can I ask anything on that, or should I not? To the city, I'm suggesting.
Not directly, no.
Doesn't cover it, or not directly? I should ask that.
Oh,
or both.
It doesn't directly cover that. But what do you want? You want to ask?
I'm just trying to get a sense of. I don't think there's any revenue opportunity for the city, but what is in it for the city other than having this on our land? And the California Coastal Commission, I know, governs the ultimate decision here, but what's in it for El Segundo?
I can't answer that question, but I could point out that I think it's very important that the city reviews the mitigation plan that would be in the draft EIR and look at what potential impacts there are to the city and make sure that your needs are met and your comments are reflected in your response to that. We are proposing pipelines through the city. We're proposing a treatment plant in the city. So we look forward to your input and seeing what, based on those impacts, what we can do to mitigate those. That's where I think the review by the city is extremely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Dr. Brand? No? Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we look forward to the two hearings coming up on May 12th and April 25th.
Thank you, Nabashi.
On Richmond Street. Thank you.
On Richmond Street. Okay. City Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Persack.
Here.
Councilmember Brand.
Present.
Councilmember Dugan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles.
Here.
And Mayor Fuentes.
Here. Now is the time for public communications related to city business only. 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes total. If anybody would like to speak, now is the time.
Linda Pollard. I'm a 44-year resident of El Segundo. I've emailed all of you in the past about my concerns about the Center Cal Top Golf project. I was concerned about the inside sweetheart deal to commercialize our gem of a recreational golf course that would forever change its purpose, character, and culture. I also was dismayed by the years of machinations, negotiations, concessions, and specious justifications that favored the developers over the citizens of El Segundo. I'm thankful now, at last, that there'll be an open RFP process to bring other projects to the table. However, I challenge you all, including our new city council members, to bring your open minds to the table as well. It would be a travesty if hard work by the Lakes Task Force were only a sham exercise in futility. The results of the Lakes El Segundo survey taken in 2015 clearly showed that despite input about needed repairs and improvements, over 90% of respondents were either very satisfied or satisfied with the lakes. A majority said it was either very important or important that the lakes be under the control of the City of El Segundo as an extension of the Recreation and Parks Department. And a majority felt a top priority for the lakes was to break even for the city rather than either make money or bring cost to the city. And despite recent louder voices, I'm certain that the majority of El Segundo residents feel the same way today. Selling the soul of the lakes for nominal money while a corporation rakes in major profits won't begin to balance the city's budget. It's time to listen to the quieter voices in our city, to put away forced agendae and vengeful threats to bulldoze, to look at the true current financial analysis, and to openly consider proposals that will maintain as much of the lakes as exists today for the wishes of the residents and voters of El Segundo.
Hi, folks. I'm Jay Heschler, Mayor, Council. I'm a El Segundo resident. I'm also on the Planning Commission, but I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I'm also a board member of the South Bay Bicycle Coalition. So I'm here to remind you in our town that National Bike to School Day is happening across America May 9th. So that's a big deal. It's a chance for parents and kids to leave the car at home and experience the joy of riding a bike. It's fun, it's healthy, and it's good for our environment. I'm working with local bike shops, parents, Tracy Miller, and the Environmental Committee to help facilitate this event. So please mark it down, May 9th, Bike to School Day. But now for the bad news. Several parents have said they want their kids to participate, but they won't because there are no bike lanes to our schools. None. Not Center Street, not the middle school, not the high school, not Richmond, not St. Anthony, not Arena, not Weisburn, not Vista, Mar. No bike lanes. Not a single bike lane to any of our schools, not even sharrows or designated bike-friendly streets. So needless to say, in one of the healthiest and most progressive regions in the country, our kids will likely not be biking to school with the rest of America. That's very disappointing, and we have to solve this. And of course, this is not just about bike to school. Right now, our city planners are talking to several bike share companies with the goal of bringing last-mile solutions to our metro stops and giving our significant tech and millennial workforce bicycle options to get around El Segundo. Bike share will be a great amenity for our town. It'll help activate Main Street and Smoky Hollow. Bike share will help solve parking issues, and it will help define El Segundo as a progressive, innovative community. But bike share could fail if we have no bike lanes for bike riders to get around safely. So on behalf of our kids, our bike share programs, and cyclists from all over the South Bay, please make bike lanes a priority for El Segundo. I'd love to be standing here this time next year introducing Bike to School Day and saying it's going to work because we have bike lanes. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, executive staff. My name is Ernesto Medrano, and I am here representing the Los Angeles and Orange Counties Building and Construction Trades Council. We're about 49 local unions and district councils representing 140,000 hardworking, skilled craftsmen and women. And I'm here to speak, make some remarks on the presentation that was made on the desalination plant. We're kind of excited to see that West Basin is taking leadership in looking at the entire portfolio for water. It's extremely important, given the arid community that we live in, to have reliable, independent, sustainable, and environmentally sound source of water. We continue to depend on imported water, and as I know some of the remarks that were made, concerns about whether it's coming from the water project or the Colorado River, there's a lot of what ifs out there, and it's just extremely important for us to see that you have into consideration a very local source of water that provides for us here. In addition to that, we have a partnership agreement through a project labor agreement with West Basin to do construction. We get very excited when there's projects to build. Our members are ready to don their work boots, their hard hats, their tool belts to go out and do some work. But in addition to that, the partnership actually brings community benefits to the local area. We have a local hire provision with our agreement. that not only meets goals but exceeds goals in terms of putting young men and women in our local community to go to work. We also have a program that puts direct access to veterans, our Helmets to Hard Hats program. And additionally, we also, of course, have preference for hiring for veterans regardless of where they reside. And we're very excited about our track record in doing that. Where else can you go and not have a 4-year degree and make $60,000 a year put in the building trades for our apprenticeship programs? We want to give young men and women the opportunity, because they're not all going to go to college, and some of them will go to college and choose to go work with our trades, and we have that. So with that said, I'm very excited about the project. We're here to support the project. We know that it's kind of early. It's going to go through its process, and we'll be working through that process, but I just wanted to highlight some of the important elements that we bring to the table in terms of providing a skilled and trained workforce to build something like this. And by the way, the Carlsbad plant, I took a tour of it when it was like about 95% done, and I also took a tour of it, well actually I was there for the opening and then a tour thereafter. And we're excited and proud of the fact that it was our members that built that plant at 100%. So thank you very much for your time. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, honorable members of City Council. I'm Gail Church, your local environmentalist. So I'm excited that we're finally getting to discuss and look at the EIR for this desalination plant. I was in the public hearings back in the 90s when West Basin was pursuing the water recycling plant. And there were, of course, lots of concerns, and they've turned out to be fabulous neighbors. They snaked their way through our city installing pipes in a painless way. They've been good neighbors. They've been really good environmental partners. And I have no reason to believe that they would be other than that this time around. You know, our earth is covered 75% with water, of which 2.5% is fresh water. And 2/3 of the fresh water is stored in glaciers that are rapidly melting into the sea. So it makes good sense that we try and reclaim potable water from the oceans. I have an open mind. I'm not totally convinced that desalination in El Segundo is absolutely the best path towards that end, but I hope everybody has an open mind and gives it a good shot.
Madam Mayor, City Council people, there was someone here that walked out. He sent me a message and asked me to speak for him. He's a resident on the 900 block of Sheldon.
Would you identify
Sorry,
yourself, please?
Scott Nickel, resident El Segundo. 900 block Sheldon resident asked me to speak in his place. He simply asked that we as a city hold D.R. Horton, the developer on the Imperial site, to the standards they agreed to in their conditional uses, the conditions of their approval. Lots of construction trucks driving down their street, walls cracking, property damage, so on and so forth. They simply just want to know that the city cares about them. That's all. Thank you.
See no more public communications. We'll close. Council comments?
Greg, would you, I know there's, we have to be careful here in terms of getting involved as council members, but can you just give us a little update on D.R. Horton, where it's at in progress, and the outreach that's taken place since we had all those residents?
Yes, we decided to start holding monthly meetings that the city hosts, but D.R. Horton provides updates to the neighbors. We hear the neighbors' issues and try to correct those that are within the city's ability to correct. There are some issues going on out there that quite honestly are more civil matters between the developer and the adjacent homeowners, and we provide a venue for those conversations to take place, but we need to stay out of some of those issues. So, Greg, do we have a schedule for the next community meeting? No. We can provide something on our website that announces the next community meeting, but they have been occurring here in the council chambers on a monthly basis.
Are they on schedule?
I believe they lost some initial time due to the rains last year, so they're not on their original schedule. The townhomes are framed. The single-family homes, I think, are doing their subgrade and utility work right now.
And I'd heard that they changed their strategy. Initially, they were going to phase build and then sell, and that they're going to completely just doing it all at once. Is that accurate?
I think they've had to compact their schedule because of the lost time with last year's rainy season.
Okay. It would be good to get an update on that back to us, just because we had so many people come out and speak about that.
I can have Mr. Lee provide council with an update at your April 17th council meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you. Procedural motions, consideration of a motion to read all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda by title only.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Item number 1, consideration and possible action to approve request for proposal number 18-02 for the Lakes at El Segundo site, 400 South Sepulveda Boulevard. Fiscal impact none. City Manager?
Meredith Pettit, our Director of Recreation and Parks, is here to provide a presentation, but I think this is really more about this. We've heard good comments from the council at your last meeting. We've incorporated those in the proposed RFP, and this is hopefully your last chance to review it and finalize any of those comments so that we can begin the process of releasing the document. And Meredith, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
It's exactly what we're here tonight. We were here two weeks ago, and the draft RFP that's in your packet tonight has incorporated the feedback that we received at your last review. Also, since then, it was sent out to internal departments as well as the city attorney, and their revisions have been incorporated in the document that you have in front of you, as well as the complete set of exhibits. We are just waiting on one final piece from the golf course management company. We will be incorporating a sheet that basically has the last few years of number of golf rounds by category. So they're looking through that data, and we're just fine-tuning that. But that is the only thing that we have outstanding, and we'll anticipate adding that tomorrow. Based on your approval tonight, we are prepared to release this RFP on Thursday, 5th. And we'll be basically sending direct emails, notification that the RFP is available to notable golf course management companies, any companies or real estate developers or sport management facility operations that have reached out to us over the last several years with an interest in this project. And also we'll be posting it on a variety of websites that people would go to receive public bid notifications. Carol Beck, our golf course RFP consultant, is here tonight. We can answer any questions. Also want to take the opportunity to thank the task force members. This is a culmination of several hours on their part, about 6 meetings in the evening time period. Their job is not done, but up to this point, they've definitely dedicated a lot of time to it, and we look forward to being back in front of the City Council with some updates throughout the solicitation and the evaluation period. So thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Meredith. Any questions for Meredith? Comments?
I just have one comment. It has to do with the criteria for evaluation and selection, because we're, in the city's visions and goals, it talks about being self-sustaining and everything else. And we were part of a fee study that was given to us preliminarily a week and a half ago or whatever, that talks about the lakes. And I just want to point out that in the cost allocation and fee study here, the costs of the lake's operation is already self-sustaining. It doesn't provide any additional money for capital, but it does provide for a couple $100,000 of city overhead, and it's self-sustaining, and it appears to be the only Parks and Recs facility we have that is self-sustaining. So when we talk about
line 16 or line 116?
Well, it's right here. So yeah, rec line 016. There you go. Good memory there, Mayor. But when we talk about the criteria here, and we talk about 25% of the evaluation, I don't know what it is we're going to evaluate for the financial impact here. So that shouldn't stop us from going out with the EIR, but I think there's some work to be done to understand the real economics of this thing, because as we start to go through this, there's more and more information that comes available, and it's a different story today than it was months ago when this task force got started. So do you have any information on what the 25% of financial impact is going to look at?
Sure, that's evaluating the operating budget that in pro forma that they put in their packet. So what is their access to capital? What is their proposed operating budget? And based on the feedback from the city council, that was changed from the term financial return to the city to financial impact. So it's really just an evaluation of the finances as presented in the proposal. We'll be weighing all of those things that you mentioned, such as the capital improvement plan over a long period of time, and if they really have the ability to perform what they're proposing.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay, so review and approve. Looks like it's approved. Do we need to take a vote, City Attorney?
Take a motion to release it, don't we? Or we need a motion to release it?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0. Thank you, Meredith. The committee who has been working on this, like you said. Item number 2, consideration and possible action to approve the El Segundo Senior Housing Board Corporation, Park Vista, proposed reserve fund policy, fiscal impact none. City Manager.
This is both a Recreation and Parks and a Finance Department presentation. Meredith Pettit is going to begin, and Juliana Demers is going to walk us through the proposed policy.
All right. So if you recall, back in October, the president of the Senior Housing Board provided a report to City Council to inform you of the activities that they were undertaking to analyze the future financial position of Park Vista. The basis of the report and the various solutions that were presented was this reserve study, and this is an annual study that the board and the property management company use a third party to provide to them. It forecasts the future facility improvement projects and costs. Over the next 30-year period, the report indicated the need for just over $3.2 million to be set aside, and currently the reserve funds are approximately $1.6 million. We're about 50% funded. The reserve study was then reviewed by the Public Works and Finance directors and departments, and a meeting was held with the property manager, Neil Cadman, and 2 members of the Senior Housing Board. To gain a more accurate picture of the funds needed into the future, it was recommended that the board explore and adopt official policies that would help structure annual contributions to the reserve fund. And once we do this, those annual contributions can then be programmed into the analysis to really get a better picture of how to make decisions moving forward in terms of the financial sustainability at Park Vista. So with the help of the Finance Department, the board is recommending City Council action to adopt these reserve policies, and Revenue Manager Juliana Demers provide more details as to what those policies entail.
Good evening, Mayor Fuentes, member of City Council. So I'm here to speak about the reserve policy proposed for Park Vista Senior Center, senior housing. Just to put this under perspective, a reminder of what the city has as far as reserve policies. So the long-term future goal for the city is to maintain its reserves under 20% of its operating expenses. We are currently at 18% at $12.4 million. And in addition to an economic uncertain reserve of $2 million. So we currently as a city have $14.4 million in reserves. The recommendation for Park Vista is to create an operating reserve policy as well as a capital reserve policy. Under the operating reserve policy, the goal is to take 15% of the annual operating budget and put it as a reserve to use for some type of emergencies or any unanticipated decline in revenues or increase in expenses. For this current year, the operating budget for Park Vista, this 15% will represent about $67,000 that would be put aside to those reserves. Just to put this under context, having a formal operating reserve policy, a city and its component units is the best practice recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association is to have a formal policy in place. So Park Vista being under a city component unit, we will use the same type of recommendation. Under the reserve policy, any funds, any use of that reserve must be approved by City Council. For the capital reserve policy, the proposed here, the recommendation would be to get the net income from each year, subtract that operating reserves, the 15% that we just mentioned, and with that created this capital reserve to use for any future capital improvement project or any unanticipated capital related emergencies. Under perspective for this current budget year, we're thinking about a net income of approximately $190,000 to go under this capital reserve policy. For the future budgets, the projection is about $200,000. As Meredith said, we currently have $1.6 million under the Park Vista Reserve at this point, and with these policies, this net income is going to continue rising this reserve. As with the operating reserve, the capital also, any funds, any use of the funds must be approved by City Council. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Juliana. Council, questions, comments?
Juliana, thank you. Can you remind us what, I think you said it earlier, what's the total amount based on that reserve study in terms of needed capital for Park Vista? 3.2 million or 3.2? So it'll take us, assuming we don't spend any of that money, it'll take us 8 to 10 years to even accumulate enough to get these things done in the future, right? So this is part of the solution to fix the Park Vista gap, not all of the solutions.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I just wanted to clarify. So that $1.5 million that's currently in reserve, is $800,000 of that the money that we moved from the general fund back to Park Vista?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And just to clarify, the net revenues are generated from the rents that are paid there. There's no outside monies coming into that, so that's self-funding from this. So
that's it.
Yeah, correct.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the reserve, both the operating and the capital reserve policy suggestions.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0. Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, Meredith. Item 3, consideration and possible action to announce the appointments to the Technology Committee. And we are pleased and grateful to appoint Timothy Dodd and Matt Knox, both to partial terms that expire June 30th. Oh, I'm sorry. Timothy's expires June 30th, 2020, and Matt Knox's partial term expires June 30th, 2021. So they're going to be joining a committee of very committed, intelligent, engaged people who have been helping us come up with our policies for the IS and assist our new IS director, Charles Mallory. So thank you to them.
That still leaves 2 openings.
Yes. Suzanne, may I mention something? We're really fortunate, both these people, one of them lives in El Segundo, one does business in El Segundo. The one that lives in El Segundo works for the city of Santa Monica and is actually the chief performance officer. So they have a whole separate division that basically manages performance in the city, all their metrics, how are they doing, so we can learn a lot from him in that role. So we're excited about that. And then the other guy, Matt Knox, who I've known for quite some years, is very adept and successful in the technology space, and he has an office here in El Segundo. So it's more committed people, as you mentioned, but also some really qualified heavy hitters in tech. So it's good stuff. Thank you.
Did you have something, Dr. Brand? Oh, thank you. Consent agendas. Any polls? May I have a motion to approve items 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, 5-0. Thank you. New business. City manager.
There were, Mayor, members of council, there were a number of concerns raised over the weekend about books being recycled by the library, and I just wanted to give a little bit of background and talk about what we're doing. We are in the process, talking about technology, of removing the reference section of the library, the large stacks of reference books that you would traditionally do research with. They're being less used. They're in a very choice location of the library, near the large windows, and aren't really serving their purpose anymore. And what the service that we are being asked to provide at the library, it has more to do with technology and Wi-Fi and internet stations. So we are in the process, and you're going to receive a presentation at your next meeting on removing the reference desks, the reference stacks, and installing a Wi-Fi zone with device-friendly seating and ports and plugs and all those modern conveyances. The issue is we need to discard the books. We went through them. We made a mistake. We put some of the reference books directly in the recycle bin. We should have offered them to the Friends of the Library first. That is what we typically do. The Friends then decide which ones they're going to sell and which ones they're going to dispose of. I've asked staff to stop disposing of books for the time being, other than those that are clearly damaged or mold or mildew infested, and the library board and the Friends and staff can look at what our options are for donating the books, reusing the books, giving the books away, etc. So those conversations will continue.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage people to become involved with the Friends of the Library. It's a wonderful volunteer organization, and there's 2 ways you can become involved, and you could do both. You can volunteer your time, or you can donate to them. They're a tremendous resource to our library and make a lot of things possible, and I wish we had a Friends of the City of El Segundo to help us fundraise and do things. So if you have it in your heart, check out the Friends of the Library. Anything else, City Manager? Thank you. City Attorney?
Nothing this evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
City Clerk?
Of course. Guess what's coming up? Tuesday, April 10th will be election. Today was the last day to turn in your request for vote by mail for regular applications, but of course there's always work with everyone to make sure everyone is able to vote. And if you cannot remember where your polling place is, you can go to www.lavote.net, and that will tell you where your polling place is in case you don't have your sample ballot.
Is your office accepting ballots?
We accept ballots. Drop them off. Have until close of 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Our city treasurer is not here this evening. Councilmember Brand.
So I want to talk about the same thing that the clerks just talked about, and that's the election on next Tuesday. If you haven't already voted, I'd urge everyone to fill out their absentee ballot or to show up in person to vote at the polls on the 10th. As I mentioned last time, simply posting on social media is not going to count when the ballots are reviewed after the polls close. If you have to make a choice in the allocation of your time, the way the democracy works is to vote, not to post. So you can do both if you have time, but the key thing is to vote. Democracy works better when the turnout is better, and it can make quite a difference in the way things resolve. So just want to share that. I think it's timely, and wish everybody good luck in the race, and also remember our measure on there to vote on that also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. Councilmember Perstek?
Yeah, I want to thank the Parks and Recs Department for posting the egg hunt last Saturday. It was very well attended. We will be working I know the Meredith and her team will be looking at options on how to try to keep the parents off the fields, let the kids pick up the eggs rather than the parents. So look out for next year. We'll hopefully have some improvements there. I did talk to the police Chief Whalen about the cake hunt, and he confirmed that there was no issues with the cake hunt that took place in town. So I guess it seemed well attended, and but there's no issues from the police department. And Mayor Fuentes and I were able to take a look at the new pool. There's a nice big hole in the ground, and we've been assured that August is the date. So we're hopeful, and it's looking pretty good. So thank you.
It's 2 big holes in the ground.
2 big holes in the ground.
Thank you. Councilmember Dugan?
You're not taking bets on August, are you?
You are.
Yeah, I might go the over on that one, but just how things go. I'm gonna pass.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles, I see you have something under your name.
Yes, so this is something that's been discussed in the past. It's consideration and possible action to authorize 2 city council members to develop strategies and options to increase the city of El Segundo's allocation of local property tax. And I know that Councilwoman Fellhauer and before her, several other council members had brought this idea forward. And essentially, after Prop 13, the way property taxes were allocated, El Segundo's on the very low end of the scale. You've got City of LA, which is over 26% of the property tax. I think the average is somewhere around 11% of property tax per city in LA County. I'm not sure what the weighted average is. I know Joe's out on vacation, but knowing that LA gets 26% and they're the lion's share, it's got to be skewed much higher than the 11% average. And so it's what I'm hoping to gain here is just a sense of trying to get to a somewhat swift feasibility analysis, go or no go on is this even worth pursuing as a city, ideally before we get into strategic planning and put this on as a potential work plan item, but just to talk about it and say, should a couple people on the council get involved with exploring this? What avenues do we need to consider? Partnering with some of the other cities on the list, like I think it's Hawaiian Gardens and Rancho Palos Verdes, and coalition building, working with LA County. I've already had conversations with Mark Warnick and people in Supervisor Hahn's office, very preliminary, and they don't obviously seem open to making anything move, and there's this whole notion of other cities having to give something up. But having said all that, I think it's worth exploring. And it's been something that's been on my list since I ran, and then candidates recently have been talking about it as well. So I think time is of the essence. If we're going to consider something that's going to be a work plan item, which would start in the next fiscal year, we ought to start considering what's involved in exploring it, maybe even working with Mayor, Council of Governments. I'm sure you've had those conversations. So that is why I asked to have it on the agenda.
I wish you well.
I know it's going to be an uphill battle, but to make a friendly wager on whether or not we can make an impact.
Do you need a motion to do that? I'm right behind you, Drew. I'm going to be cheering you all the way. So good luck. I'll just share.
Lazy boy with that.
I just share that this comes up periodically, and every time you go through it, the logic is just overwhelmingly simple. Why can't we get this done? And you get to the county supervisor's office and you get into that argument about, tell me who's going to give something up so I can give you back something, and it just stops every time. So I like to make a motion that we keep going after this, keep gnawing away at it. So
there was one thing I read in the because I was looking at the staff reports from way back when, I think 90s if I remember. No, I'm sorry, 2013, but there was one before that even. Yeah. And there was some concession that was made at the state level. There was some legislation that was enacted that changed something after Prop 13. I can't remember the specifics, so that just gave me a little bit of a sense of cautious optimism.
There you go.
But in all honesty, I don't want to spend a bunch of city resources on that. I think if we can get to couple people, 4 or 5 people in a room, city attorney, city manager, a little bit of brainstorming, whiteboard session. What would it take? Do we want to go down this path or not? How much money are we looking to spend before we even decide if it's, you know, worth pursuing?
Yeah. So we have a motion, and before we vote on it, I'm guessing you want to wait till after the election before you get your second subcommittee member.
Well, I'm not even saying it's me. I'm just saying that, and I didn't put 2. Originally was form a task force of council members and other people, maybe other cities, maybe members of the COG mayor that have the same challenge. And then I think Mark maybe suggested that we start with 2 council members.
I heard a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
4-1. Very good. Anything else? Nothing on the list?
I want to say the mayor's Good Friday breakfast was amazing. We had State of the City, was that a week prior? I think it was a week prior, right? And then mayor's Good Friday breakfast was great. We had a very inspirational speaker from the South Bay Lakers Athletic Association. Youth Foundation. And they do some great things, and she is an inspiration herself. And it was, I think, officially Mayor Fuentes' last public appearance in that kind of forum and setting, and you did a great job, and I thought it was a wonderful event. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, let's see. Since we last met, I've attended Sanitation District meeting. I think we were all at EDAC. We had a special session meeting, was it last week, for the fee study? And Councilmember Dugan referred to that, but we had a third party who came in and did an assessment and presented with staff, and we accepted all the recommendations, so we'll have some additional revenue coming in, and also the fees put us online with other cities. That's a good thing. They hadn't been looked at in a long time. Last Friday or the Friday before, we had a wonderful morning here. We had the first step of the Student Government Day. It was Shadowing Day, and Carol, Drew, Donna, myself each had seniors assigned to us who are going to be the council members on May 23rd. There were, 20 kids here with all the department heads, and I think it's like one of the best days in my 8 years to have all those young people who are so engaged and excited and had great ideas and asked really thoughtful questions of us when, we had them in the conference room, and they gave us things to think about. In fact, one person was talking about recreation and parks, and I leaned over to Drew and said, we should have a student assigned to our recreation and parks committee like the school board does. It's not really, that student doesn't vote, but they participate and they give opinions and say what's been going on. And I think that's something for the next council to consider, because it's young people who use a lot of our recreation and parks. So that was wonderful. So thank you to Dr. Melissa Moore, Dr. Jennifer Tedford, Craig Gass, the teacher who made it possible. Thank you, Greg Carpenter. Thank you, Mickey Tagley, who organized it. And thank you to every department head and every city employee who participated. It was a wonderful day, and I'm going to be here on May 23rd to watch the council meeting. It's going to be great. So also, we heard earlier, but the Battle of the Badges was a very fun event. There was some real basketball going on there, competition between the police and the fire, and it was for a wonderful reason, for the El Segundo Education Foundation. It was just a lot of fun. Last week I attended the Arts and Cultural Committee meeting at ESMOA, and what a really smart, fun, engaged, I know I use that word a lot, but they were a group of people on that committee. There's so much talent there and so many ideas that it was a good use of my time. Fun. It was fun, and a lot got accomplished that day. Also, I want to thank the League of Women Voters and the El Segundo Women's Club. They hosted the Candidates Night last week. It was a wonderful event. And as Don said, we have 4 great candidates who are running for council. And then our city manager and our finance department head also talked a little bit about the ballot Measure C. So that was good. Education is a good thing. Again, what Drew said about the mayor's Good Friday breakfast, thank you to the Rotary Club, the nicest people in town, for organizing it, especially Gilda Dykeman. And Keisha Nix was our guest speaker, and she was from the Los Angeles Lakers Youth Foundation. And what an extraordinary organization they are, as I said earlier tonight. I mean, they have just been there every step of the way for us, everything we ask for and that we don't ask for. They're such good community members. But the things that Keisha talked about the Lakers reaching out to all these cities that are around us for underserved youth. We're so blessed here in El Segundo with the resources we have and the people that we have, and not every community is as lucky as we are. So they do noble work. And as Carol said, we did the aquatics facility tour. That was fun. Middle of August, or so they said. We're still going for, that's their target date. But it was fun to see the 2 big holes in the ground and the gymnasium where our locker rooms and our bathrooms are going to be. So it's really a wonderful partnership between the City of El Segundo and the Weisburn School District. And when it's done, everybody's going to be so happy that we have it. So we are very blessed. So with that, we'll go back to public communications. Seeing none, we'll close public communications, and with that, we are adjourned, 8:36. What was that?